What up, everybody? It's Dregs One. Welcome back to another episode of the History of the Bay podcast, recorded here at Empire Studios. Trevor Potter behind the lens, getting this set up very professionally. Shout out to my main man Jan in the house, observing a little field trip exercise today. And we got a special guest. This is somebody that has played a major role in the Bay Area graffiti scene, renowned for his handstyles, his pieces, and just consistent work ethic over the years, and played a very pivotal role in documenting the culture, which we'll get into as well. And we're talking with HTK's own Renos.
What up?
What up, man?
Hey, man.
Thanks for coming through. I know we've been talking about this for, feels like at least a year.
I think it's been about a year and a half. Yeah. Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate all the times we've got to connect before and chop game, and it's been cool building with you, and I'm excited to have you here and bless us with some of your story.
Word up. Thank you.
And on top of that, we're going to have a little art exercise today with some Black Book sessions, so excited to see what you come up with there.
Me too.
You're like really known for your hand styles.
Yeah, somehow I kind of just went down that rabbit hole. I've always liked tagging, and that's always been my favorite thing to do out of all graffiti. Tags are just kind of the quintessential element that I enjoy doing the most.
How did you develop your style there?
Ooh, I just bit. I bit everything I saw. I bit everything I could find, and then just kept going down weird rabbit holes and trying to come up with whatever I could. I bit a lot of New York styles, a lot of bus hopper styles from San Francisco that I took from, and then I guess I just kind of came up with my own little jambalaya of style. I don't know if it really. A lot of people tell me it doesn't really fit anything in particular. Here's my wannabe bus flow.
Okay, looks about right.
Right.
Kind of like the 80's style bus flow.
Yeah, I kind of got stuck in that era. That's kind of when I came up, so that's how I kind of learned it or whatever.
Were you hitting buses?
Yeah, but I wasn't hitting munis. We had our own system, Samtrans.
So
I was trying to get busy on that.
I never knew that people were getting up on the Samtrans, huh?
Yes. We had our own little scene. Like, we actually had yards that we would go and climb into at night, and paint we'd rock them at night. Yes, we had our own little scene. It didn't really translate. Every once in a while, we'd get some San Francisco writers down there, and they would crush it. Swab and Sun, GF, they came through and rocked it. Trem hit them a couple times. Stash 5, TMF hit them.
Where were the Samtrans yards?
Actually, right on. There's one right on El Camino and Brewster. It used to be like a little layup yard. The buses would go in there. We'd climb over the back of the fence, over a pile of wood, and then go into the yards. And at that point in time, they didn't even know it was happening, right? Like, Graff wasn't a thing there, so it was kind of a free for all. We could go in there once it got dark and just rock it and be out. I guess I just kind of kept going off the one flow and just building from doing it in one motion, right? Like, trying to just do it all in one flow, similar to bus hopper style. And then I just kind of got, I guess you could say I kind of got fancy with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
The evolution, I think, is just doing it millions and millions of times, right? Like, I kind of have I have an OCD, a little bit of a tick, that once I start writing, I just keep going, and don't stop. So I think it just evolved naturally, I guess you could say, into to what it is now.
Is there any specific writers that influenced that?
Oh, that influenced my tags? Definitely. Can I Twist for one? Obviously, he's got beautiful hand styles. A lot of the New York dudes I bit off of. Ramelzy. Some of the early dudes. There was a book called Street Art, and it has just a couple different photos of tags, and I studied that for quite a while. I still don't even know exactly what they say, but they're amazing. And I studied all the inside photos I could ever find from subways in New York. And that was, to me, that was like the quintessential. It's just an inside that was just crushed with tags. It was the coolest thing to look at ever.
Nice.
That was my jam. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's take it back to the very beginning then. You already mentioned like San Mateo County.
Right.
Is that where you grew up?
Yeah. So yeah, I grew up in San Mateo County, the Peninsula. We kind of got into Graff, and we fell into the breakdancing hip hop kind of thing. Probably in about 82 or 83. So around 4th, 5th grade, I was already kind of into breakdancing, and everybody had a breakdancing name, and you kind of just learned to do bubble letters or whatever, and it kind of just went from there, right? Like we were into hip hop, we were into riding BMX bikes, skateboarding, all this stuff. It was kind of just like a hodgepodge of everything. And then, the first time I went out painting, we did tags underneath a little creek, and it just triggered a chemical reaction in my brain, and I was just bent on it from there on out, and just kept going.
What was like some of the first Graff that you remember like seeing
in San Mateo County?
Yeah. Well, actually, even before we get into Graff, like what part of what city specifically, and just what was the overall vibe over there?
So I originally landed from Chicago in Redwood City, and it was pretty much just your, I don't know, blue collar kind of basic, nothing crazy. It wasn't the tech boom hadn't happened. It's pretty average, group people living there. Landed there, and then from there kind of just bounced around some of the towns close to there. Yeah, man. So I landed in Redwood City, just bounced around kind of all the little towns right there. The first Graff we started to see would be like your early Cholo tags, Led Zeppelin, kind of like your stoner Graff or whatever. And then slowly but surely you started to see like a couple like breakdancing names here and there. And then that's when we all kind of picked up on it, like, oh, this is a thing, right? And then we'd see TV, or somehow we figured out that kids were writing their breakdance crew names around. There were dudes in Foster City that wrote, there was like a breakdancing crew called IDC. There was a abandoned school that a bunch of people painted. There was a dude who wrote Oz. There was a Sway from Boston came through, and he did a bunch of Graff like in San Mateo. And we saw that, and his handstyles were, extremely developed. We were just young kids and toys, basically, and that was some of the early Graff we saw. And then in about 83 or 4, I started to go down to San Jose quite a bit, and I'd start to see a lot on the sides of the freeways. The creeks would be bombed, and then it just kind of spread, and I'd always just know to look out the window and look for Graff, and I found it.
So you're pretty much down like since like the beginning, basically.
Well, I don't want to come across and claim or front, but I mean, I've been following it since, I guess, the beginning, inception in the Bay Area. Yeah.
Make sure you head over to my Patreon for more exclusive content. This week we have Renos going through some classic flicks from his archive and breaking down stories behind legendary walls from Bay Area graffiti history. Plus, you'll get access to bonus content from our other episodes, early access to all podcasts, and much more. Hit the link in the description to sign up.
You're into skateboarding too?
I do, yes. I do skate. Yeah, I've been skating pretty much since I was a kid as well. Started, we BMX bike, skate or whatever, and it all kind of just, joined together or whatever. And I've been skating for probably as long as, if not a little bit longer than I've been riding. And I feel like they go hand in hand. There's a little bit of a crossover between the two.
Like I was gonna say, what do you think is the connection between graffiti and skating?
I think the couple different ones. It attracts both kind of attracted like your latchkey kids or whatever, and it also served as the streets of the canvas, right? So you go out looking for spots and lurking around the back of industrial areas the same way as you do for Graff as you do for skating. So I think that was kind of the crossover. Initially, I don't think there was much of a crossover. They were always kind of separate worlds, and then in the mid 90's they kind of converged a little bit. There was like a crossover, hip hop and I guess rave and skating. They all kind of converged for a little window of time and then broke apart again.
There's also like a lot of connection with like the board art too.
Yes, and definitely like a lot of the original graphics that I gravitated towards had something to do with graffiti. Like some of the brands kind of used Graff as their influences as well, and as kids we all gravitated to whatever board had graffiti on it. There was a Bryce Knights board that had a BK little kind of burner on that. That was like a big deal when we were kids.
Also, you mentioned latchkeys. Were you a latchkey kid?
Yeah, I was a latchkey kid in terms of I had a lot of freedom, kind of, right? And my parents had separated, so I had two different houses, so I kind of bounced around a little bit. I gravitated, I was thinking about it, I kind of always gravitated towards the mischief kids, right? Like the trouble funk kids or whatever. We always kind of seemed to find each other, and a lot of times they were, the kids that skated or whatever. So, I was kind of a kid that always looked for adventure, and I felt like Graff and skating kind of attracted the same type of kid.
So you got into like bombing pretty early, or were you just mostly going to like yards and stuff?
Initially we just started getting into bombing. We would just go out, get a can of spray paint. We only, we were toys, so we didn't know what we were doing. Get a can of spray paint, take the bus down to like the Hillsdale Mall or something, and then just start walking around there and hitting tags or whatever. There wasn't any Graff before that down there, and we started to do that, and that became the fun thing to do, because at the same time you take your skateboard, so you'd be skate for a little bit, hit a tag, and then skate somewhere else and keep going down the line.
Well, when I think of like San Mateo County, right, I think of Daly City and I think of TMF.
Correct.
Did those guys have a big influence on you?
Most definitely. Stash 5 was down in Redwood City for quite a while. We wound up linking up with him, and he definitely had a lot of impact on us. Trem was down there for a little bit, and Bizarro also helped kind of teach Jaster to give him some styles, Jaster being a member of HTK. So definitely they had a big influence on us. Nell and Rise wound up working. They worked at an Aaron Brothers, and they would let us come in and go shopping every once in a while. So that was definitely a plus and a big influence in many, beyond just style, right? But just kind of schooling us on what's good, and they'd kind of look out and, okay, go shopping and do your thing and cut out.
Were you always writing Renos?
No. So I started off writing, my first name was The Cosmic Kid.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like TCK or just The Cosmic Kid?
The
like
Cosmic Kid. I would write out Cosmic Kid.
Right.
That would be my jam, right? And this is like early breakdancing days, so, and we were like so young, we didn't realize like we're taking a long time to do this, and it's dangerous, we're gonna get caught or whatever. But so I started out with Cosmic Kid. Then I wrote Mace for a while. That was kind of like the first name that I really started to like try and get up with consistently over time. Mace being that old weapon with the spikes on it or whatever. Then I kind of got into a little bit of, got in some trouble for that, so I changed it up. I went with Merc. I wrote Merc for quite a while. That was kind of the first time I did my full all-city tour, and I was really focused on getting up town to town to town. I linked up with another guy who wrote more, and then we formed a crew, and then we really went down the rabbit hole of getting up. And then eventually that came to an end when I had a case come up, and I had to come up with a new name, so I changed it. I S1er. I did it backwards and then just stuck with it since then.
Interesting. So Renos. So okay, S1er. That's how it all started.
Correct. Because like oneer, like in the late '80s in the city, oneer was a thing, right?
I think it's still a thing.
Correct, right? Yeah. So that's where it came from. I was like, oh, oneer, S1er for, initial or whatever, and did it backwards because I thought I was being nifty, and I was camouflaging it. So that's how I came up with it. And it just sounded cool. It sounded different. I didn't know what it was. It just sounded neat. So I stuck with it. And that was probably in '88.
How'd you catch that first case?
Well, like I had said, we were all going into the yards. We had our own little scene down there. There was a whole group of writers, and this is probably 1987 or so, 86, 87, 88. And short story long, the scene got pretty big, and there were a lot of kids. I had some drama with a local kid. He got caught, dropped a dime. Next thing you know, my house was frozen. I had raids, yada, yada, yada. Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
Well, that's one thing about San Mateo County is like they never really played around when it comes to graffiti, right? Like I felt like or with just anything actually, it was kind of always known. Like once you cross that border from San Francisco to there, it's like the consequences are a lot heavier.
Yeah, they don't play, and even back then they didn't even really know what graffiti was, right? Like it kind of took them a while to put it together, to the point where when I did get caught, I had to go out with an officer and take photos of everything, and I took credit for 5 or 6 other tags at every place we went to, and they thought that was legit. Like they didn't even know that it was other people. And I was taking credit so that they didn't try and focus and get them into a case or, get them involved with legal aspects or whatever. And I was already caught, so it didn't make a difference. But yeah, they had no idea kind of what Graff was about at all at that point.
Were you still a juvenile?
Yes, sir.
So they raided your house over this?
They did. Yes. And when I say raided, it means, well,
they showed up. And
they showed up, and then once they had me in custody, they froze the house so nobody could come or go until they acquired evidence.
Got it.
Yeah.
And then what kind of sentence did they give you?
Particularly interestingly enough, it was kind of crazy. I got put on house arrest, and I had to go out with the police officers and go around and point to all the graffiti I did. And they took photos and they documented it. And then they agreed not to turn me into the I don't even know if I should say this. They agreed to not turn me into the other cities, and it kind of disappeared. It was very strange.
Oh.
And then that was kind of it for a while.
They just lost track of you.
I think they were excited that they weren't going to have any more tags in the neighborhood, and they just kind of were like, once you don't do this anymore, and we'll drop it.
Gotcha. So, okay, you mentioned, so you went from S1er to Renos. When did HTK crew come around?
That would have been probably 1990, either 93 or 94 is kind of when that started. At the time, I was in a crew called Dank Daddies. We were kind of, we were painting the Judah tunnels quite a bit. We were doing Graff, but we were also just kind of a little bit more of a party crew as well.
Okay. Oh, so let me stop you there. So you had already kind of moved up to painting in the city.
Yeah. So yes, as a toy, I was coming up to San Francisco from whenever the first initial Psycho City piece that Doug did. I had a friend first kid who I started writing with. He wrote Wild One. His parents were separated, and his mom lived in the city. So we would come up to the city on the bus. She would meet us, and then she would take us around town and show us what was, whatever's happening in the city. and she took us to Psycho City. And so, yeah, I remember like, first skating up and seeing that piece first in real life, and mind was blown. So yeah, I was in the background of tags, catching tags in the backgrounds of everyone's pieces for many years as a toy in the city. Going to Psycho City and then Franklin and Clockwork, Silver Terrace, Coors Yard, Monkey Island. I was lurking around all those spots. Me and Diet, some other people, Metalman Ed.
Wow. Okay. So you're just kind of exploring the city on your own.
Yeah, that was our jam. Pretty much every, from 7th grade on, every Saturday morning, the first thing we would do is wake up. We would catch the first bus out of town, usually the 7F at about 7:15, and we would be up in the city by 9 o'clock, and we would be up here until dark, and try and get home before it got dark or whatever. And that was our jam. And we were skating Embarcadero before Embarcadero, and then going around catching tags and causing mischief, basically. Yeah.
So what, like, how would you describe the San Francisco graffiti scene in the early 90s?
Ooh, the early 90s?
Because that's the time period we're talking about, right? Or
actually,
80s.
80s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go there then.
Yeah.
How would you describe the San Francisco graffiti scene in the 80s?
In the 80s, it was dope. There was a lot of, obviously, TMF, TWS were rocking. Psycho City was active, and people were, there's Clockwork. So yeah, it was jumping. There was a lot of focus on pieces. The buses were getting hit, but it wasn't crazy yet. And then eventually the buses got crazy, and that was just insane to see. The buses being bombed. That was kind of, for a long time, that was our highlight, is just seeing who was rocking the buses. So it was definitely jumping. There was a lot of people writing, right? There was a lot. I feel like there was probably more people writing then than there are now.
Really?
In terms of quantity of people,
yeah,
I would say.
You're probably right.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Actually, I'm sure you're right.
It kind of was more of a thing that more people did, right? Like, they might not get too into it, but everybody had a tag, and a lot of people were getting active.
I always say it was like a rite of passage.
Yes.
It's just kind of like part of growing up out here. Like, everybody, kind of tries their hand at it for at least like a school year or something like that.
Right? Like there was that style that everybody had in high school, like you were saying, like not everybody, but everybody could figure out how to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And everyone had a name, and yeah, that was definitely a thing. So yeah, the 80s were jumping. Yeah, it was a good time for sure.
I think the other thing that a lot of people tell me who were around in the 80s is like, that was an era where most of the writers were like local from the Bay, and the style, the scene was kind of developing like under its own influence.
Yes.
As opposed to like the 90s, when a lot of the more well-known writers from here weren't even from here. They were just transplants.
Correct. Yes, definitely. And I think that the influx of outside writers was good, but at the same time it watered down the native styles that had existed, and it changed them. I'm not going to say for better or for worse, but it changed them and had an impact. And before, yes, it was definitely like a local scene versus your quote unquote out of towners. And there was still like the, maybe even in some ways the quote unquote downtown writers didn't exist then.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, what does that even mean? I just talked about this, like downtown hands, which is like a term I grew up using, but like, what is a downtown writer?
And this is just my take, but I think a downtown writer are all those people that move, because when you move here from somewhere else, you kind of gravitate towards downtown. So,
right.
You're not up in the neighborhoods.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. So the quote unquote downtown hands might be attributed to being the fancier side of things, right? Or just different.
touristy side
versus you get out to the cuts in the whatever, certain places.
You're not just gonna like wander into like Viz Valley.
No.
If you just got here.
No, you're not going to go there, and you're not going to see those styles, right? Like,
right.
Sometimes those dudes they're not even going downtown, right? Because why would they? You're in a neighborhood. I mean, and I think in some ways I was even somewhat susceptible to that too. Not being, living in the city, I would be gravitating towards downtown. So sometimes my exposure would be limited if I didn't get on a bus and go out to go get markers or supplies or whatever. I wouldn't see the local hands. But that's the other thing that changed with that, is that once the buses were rocked, that's when you saw the local hands running all city,
right,
on the outsides and insides. And that's what, when we would get on the bus, we'd study the insides, and there weren't downtown riders. Those were just the local heads rocking it.
Yeah,
such as Arm and ROT, MC, AIM, Lays, Gears, Rewind. Those are some things I remember.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you too. Did you get any hassle for even being from Redwood City?
Of course. Yeah. we were subjected to all the same funk as everybody, right? So definitely ran into quite a bit of chaos. That was just part of the game too, right? Like you'd get jumped or get some funk, and that was just part of it. People
try to take your paint.
Oh yeah. Sometimes they wouldn't even try, they just would. It wasn't a try, it was a do, And I mean, it's funny, I was talking with my barber the other night, and we were talking about how, like, back in the day, getting jumped or getting into some funk and getting your pockets checked was a common thing. And you'd take your lumps sometimes, you'd win sometimes or whatever, but it was a common thing. And I don't think that's as frequent now, I think
probably not.
Yeah. Which could be good or bad, I don't know.
It's hard to say. I mean, there's definitely like some regulation that comes with that.
Correct.
But then at the same time, like, a lot of people who were doing that shit weren't trying to regulate. They were just like bullies, basically.
Yeah, just thugging.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the other thing about it being like kind of a rite of passage, is like sometimes graffiti attracted people that didn't really care that much about actual graffiti. They were just into like illegal shit and hanging out. Correct. And they just happened to have a tag or something like that.
Yes. Yeah, and looking back, the kids that I was writing with too, like a lot of Graff was kind of the least, that was the smallest infraction that they were making on things, right?
Right.
Like, they were involved in other stuff too, and Graff just was a side project, and they dipped in and dipped out, and then some of them didn't make it out of whatever else they were into.
Yep. Yep, I know that story. Well, one of the biggest known writers from like the South Bay, or the West Bay, I should say, is Orfn, right? I believe he's from Palo Alto.
Yes, correct.
Did you know Orfn?
I did. Yes. Yeah. I initially knew Orfn actually from skating. He started to make noise early on. This is probably 87 or so, 86, 87. And at that point in time, he was known as Aaron King. He was one of the first dudes to ollie the big stairs at Stanford. I skated Palo Alto quite a bit, and we started to hear about this dude, Aaron, and then we started skating with him, and he was a phenomenal skateboarder, super good. And this is even, this is pre-Graff, right? So he was just skating and ripping. And then eventually he started writing. He was also skating with another kid, Johnny Fair, Reverse, rest in peace, both of them. They both skated super good, both rippers. So I kind of knew them ahead of time, from skating, right? And then eventually they kind of got into the Graff game as well.
What kind of impact do you think he had on the scene?
He had a huge impact, you know. He had a huge impact initially at skating. Both him and Reverse.
Yeah, isn't there like wasn't he on the cover or some? There's some famous photo of him I've seen. Like, yeah, was it on a Thrasher photo or something like that?
I don't know. If
some magazine.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure which one, but he was making a lot of noise just with his skating. Yeah, and then he started getting into Graff, and him and Reverse kind of started their own little crew. I believe it was DOH, Dukes of Hazzard, and Daggers, and they were kind of like funny Graff a little bit, right? Like kind of making fun of it somewhat, and then they eventually both got super into Graff more so than skating.
Right.
And then they kind of, they took it from there, and had a huge influence. Yeah.
He had a very unique style.
Yes.
Wasn't he also like an actual orphan, kind of like? Didn't he come up out of like group homes and spend some time like on the streets and shit?
Yeah, I believe he was. Yes, he was originally adopted and orphaned. He did have. I don't want to talk. I'm not an expert on any of this, right? But no, he did have a family that he lived with at some point in time, but. Both he and Johnny and also Marvel, they got so kind of into Graff that it was backpack, skateboard, streakers, racking, bombing.
Yeah.
And, so, yeah, that was kind of the jam.
I mean, it can't be said enough, like, how up that guy was.
Correct.
There's still, like, I'm pretty sure he still has some runners.
Oh, yeah, he definitely does. There are runners I have down in my neck of the woods that he did in 93 that are still up, that I know where specifically they are and have photos of. Yeah, he was kind of like this. He was in the second wave through the peninsula, and he definitely made a lot of noise, as well as Reverse, as well as Marvel, and U.S. as a whole.
Yep.
When that started, they made a lot of noise down there, and then they did the same thing up here as well.
Yeah, U.S. is a Palo Alto crew.
Actually, U.S. and initially, and nobody quote me on this. I don't want to be called out on it, but no, I believe actually it started would be in like Millbrae, and then kind of spread down to San Mateo County.
And how did Orfn pass? He had medical condition, right?
I'm not quite. Yeah.
I met Orfn in the fucking community service graffiti abatement program.
Nice.
Yeah, that's how I met Orfn.
Dope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People were like, "That's Orfn." I was like, "What?
No way." You're like, "That's him?"
Yeah. Yeah.
So
he was cutty.
Super cutty. And we had a crew. It was Reverse, Orfn, and I. ARS, always riding Samtrans.
Nice.
Because Continue Lights, we'd be on the buses, just riding the buses around skateboards and writing Graff. And he was a super impactful dude. He made a lot of noise, as well as Reverse. He was famous outside of graffiti. Mm-hmm. He was kind of one of the first dudes to really get famous outside of Graff to your general public. My girl at the time, she had a car. Orfn had a tag on the roof, and at one point in time, she was babysitting these kids that lived up in the hills of San Mateo, and they got in the car and they looked on the roof and they go, "No way, Orfn," and they couldn't believe it. Right? Wow. They're like 12-year-old kids, and wow. they had no idea what Graff was, but they were seeing Orfn on the roof of her car and couldn't believe it.
Wow.
Yeah. That's kind of impact he had.
Wow. Rest in peace, Orfn.
For sure. And yeah, these are some photos he just randomly mailed me one time. I really like this one. Great Graffiti starts here. It's some stick figure dude painting. This was his easel. We did an art show in Oakland. These are some of his paintings from that. I believe that was in 2000 no, this would have been 99. Yeah, and then he sent me these trippy self photos, dude.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a classic one. And then we We did an art show at Upper Playground.
Oh,
That was some of his works in there.
dope. Okay, so maybe is this a good point to transition into the formation of HTK?
Yeah.
Okay, so you were saying you guys were painting the Dubose tunnels?
Yeah, so yeah, we were Dank Daddies. We were definitely doing our thing, having fun, and painting the Dubose tunnels quite a bit. And then some of the other local kids from the neighborhood, they had already kind of formed their crew. We were all painting together, but then they formed a crew, HTK. 90, I think it was 93, 94, somewhere in between there. I had to invite myself.
Really?
Yeah, I had to ask them if I could be down, you know, because they were already doing a bunch down there. They were doing a lot of freeways, and yeah, they let me in, and then yeah, just went from there. We got pretty heavy into it. 95 was kind of our year where we went way down the rabbit hole.
What do you mean by that?
Just kind of living the Graff life, right? Like we were just kind of lurking and painting nonstop. That was our focus, you know.
Lurking and painting nonstop.
Yeah.
What's the lurking part?
Acquiring supplies to go paint, basically, right?
Supplies to paint or supplies to live?
That too. All the above, right? Just kind of, you know, skirting around, weren't really working, whatever. You know, Graff was just our everyday focus. We were
Living in the city?
vision. No, not at that point in time.
Okay.
No, I was kind of just bouncing around, backpack life or whatever, riding buses and couch surfing and whatever.
Oh, you were okay. So you were. What else was going on in your life outside of Graff?
Outside of Graff?
Yeah.
I mean, I was still skateboarding. I was actually going to school as well for a little window of time. I was going to school, skateboarding, but Graff was kind of the center focus.
You weren't thinking like careers and.
No, sir.
Okay.
No, I was more just kind of focused on living. Yeah, just focused on living.
I mean, I feel like for graffiti, that's kind of for anything really. You kind of have to have a one-track mind, but for graffiti especially, you're not really gonna make a dent unless you're going at it. I mean, pretty much full time, or at least like on a regular basis.
Correct. It winds up becoming it becomes an addiction in a way, right? You just get so used to painting. You're out super late, you sleep till 2, you get up and you're in the cycle and you kind of do it again. You know, long term over time I've dipped into that, and then I have to pull back so that I can try and have a resemblance of a normal life, you know.
Yeah, some people don't pull back from that.
No, and it's interesting, like, as I've obviously been around it a long time, I definitely have taken a big step back from it. It's still always there, just kind of gnawing at me, but I've been able to kind of tone it down and try and focus on other things, more uplifting things long term.
Well, I feel like it's kind of like a time and place type of thing. Like, I think about this all the time, driving around the city and just remembering all the graffiti I used to see and all the different writers, and just really kind of coming to terms with there's no possibility anymore where like 4 guys could get an apartment for like less than $1,000. You know, have like a entry level job, if any job, like tending bar or like, you know, bus boy or working at the hardware store or whatever, art school student, and like afford to like have a life like what you described, where you're like pretty much out past 2 a.m. every night. You know what I mean? And you're just like, you're racking your groceries, you're like racking supplies, and you're like racking shit to sell to like make your rent. Like, that's not really gonna happen in like 2020 San Francisco post tech boom, you know, $3,500 studio.
So true.
It's just not gonna happen. But like those times were like hella fun because like I'm younger than you, but I was like I kind of caught the tail end of it, of like where all the writers would pretty much be at a handful of bars. If you went out bombing, you're probably gonna run into somebody else who's bombing.
Yep.
If you go to a house party, you're gonna see a bunch of other writers there. Yeah, and it was just kind of like this. It was a scene. It was a community where you could like basically be around a bunch of other people who were into that kind of shit.
And it's crazy to think of it like that, right? That we were all kind of collectively on this degenerate path or whatever, and but it was functional.
Yeah,
you could still
it was
function.
functional. Yeah,
you could do it, right?
Yeah.
Like it might not have been the best decision long term or whatever, but you had a community, you had people you could do it with, and it was, in a weird way, it was normal for us, right? You didn't even think about it, and then as time has gone on, you're like, oh, I could have been doing some other more productive things with my time, but it's all good.
Yeah, or
right?
like you see that what fucks me up is just the people who weren't able to like step back from that.
Yes.
And like went off the deep end, or like I still have some homies now. I'm like, bro, you're like 40. Like, how are you? Like, why are you this up right now? Like, what the fuck, bro? Like, it don't even like impress me anymore. I'm just like, God damn, like.
Yeah. Because at this point, you know what comes
I know
along with
exactly.
And so you're kind of like, I hope he's good, man. I hope he's doing okay, right? Like, and you don't always know. You hope for the best, but sometimes that is the case.
Exactly.
And I guess that's I personally have, it's hard for me sometimes to not be that dude as well, and wanting to be that guy that's going out, getting up all the time. It's a challenge,
Yeah.
It's definitely something I have to work on to be, just be like, nah, you're good. You're good.
Well, I mean, like on the degenerate activity side of it, it's like I think there were a lot of positives that came with it too. Like because for me it was cool being around the people that were like doing Graff, but also like getting into like certain art spaces, or like music, or clothing, or skate brands, or like. There was a lot of gallery shows. There was a lot of people doing fly shit too.
Mm-hmm.
And for like every degenerate, like total train wreck of a human being, there was also like plenty of people that were like positive and would look out for you. And I always say graffiti is like two types of writers. There's like vandals and rastas. That's my two categories. Like the vandal doesn't give a fuck and is just out to like crush, kill, destroy.
Right.
And the Rasta's just like, man, we're over here just rebelling against the Babylon system and smoking some dank and painting a piece in the alley or some shit like that.
Yep. That's true. And I think it's a delicate balance between the two for all of us, right? Like,
yeah.
You're kind of always tiptoeing on that line of playing the game, and and then real life kicks in at some point in time, and you do have to step back and let that Graff stuff kind of go and focus on whatever else it is, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's a trip.
Well, okay, so going back to HTK, so you guys were pretty much at the time that y'all were like getting active, you were on a mission to go big as a crew with graffiti.
Yeah, yes, we were kind of like I think about this. We were kind of stuck in our own little bubble because we weren't really living up in the city as a crew or whatever, right? So we're in the suburbs, but we're coming up here all the time to paint, and we were so insulated into just our crew. We didn't even kind of know what was going on outside of our crew. Like we were just so like, let's just paint, let's piece. We were hypercritical of each other to try and, just build our whatever we were doing. And as outsiders, we kind of looked at everybody else, maybe not knowing them or whatever, and we'd compare our styles to theirs and it was always the competition side of it, and we'd go back to the suburbs and sketch, and all right, we're going to come back up to the city and rock it, and then go back, and so we were kind of unique. I think we were kind of unique a little bit in that way, because we're so insulated, and we just compete amongst each other too, as to who's rocking it, who's got the best style or whatever.
Well, did y'all eventually, I mean, I feel like you did, but I'm curious of your perspective, like, did y'all eventually, like, kind of get that respect in the city as being, like, a Peninsula crew, but y'all still, like, held it down out here?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't really know, right? Like, I don't know how to measure that. Our pieces would run, right? We wouldn't get gone over all the time. We made a lot of noise. I don't know what people thought in a way, right? Like I don't know how to gauge that. I feel like yes, but that could just be ego, like, oh yeah, people respected us, but I don't know.
I'm pretty sure they did, man. I mean, you guys
cool.
were up, like, not just like a couple of you, like a lot of people from your crew, like, got up out here. Correct.
Yeah.
And also, like, y'all moved into some pretty big productions.
Yeah, we definitely got hyped on that, right? That was like our jam, and I think we were heavily influenced by like a lot of the TMF dudes on that tip of doing just productions, right? But we never did too much with backgrounds or characters or whatever, but like our productions were just heavy letter based, and that was kind of the focus, and then we'd black out the background, do some clouds and bubbles, and then kind of just keep it moving. We tried to get into doing the full things and the pretty backgrounds and all of that, but we were all just letter dudes and just kind of stuck with that pretty much. That was kind of our jam.
I remember, like, this was kind of a big chapter in Piece by Piece, which we'll get to, but kind of how, like, I don't want to say theory, but the narrative was basically once Psycho City closed down, illegal graffiti exploded in the streets. Do you agree with that still?
Definitely. Yeah, that definitely was a big thing, right? Because like even for us as out of towners, we would go to Psycho City. That was kind of like our home base or whatever. And then once that was gone, then you just started to go look elsewhere. And then at the same time too, that's when everyone really started to get up on the streets quite a bit and like focus on getting up outside of certain places. So yeah, that definitely had an impact. Yeah.
What was your stance or opinion when there was that kind of tension between LA and the Bay, and it kind of became like a locals versus out of towners kind of energy?
Well, by that point in time, I was actually, I was up in the city during that time already. So I don't know if we kind of played the outskirts a little bit, right? Because in some ways it would be fake of us to claim San Francisco at the same time because we're from a little bit further south, So yeah, we were able to kind of sit that one out a little bit, and we had our preference for style, right? Like we prefer the Bay style, but at the same time, it would be silly to not acknowledge what those dudes did, right? So yeah, we kind of played Switzerland and kind of skirted around that one a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's more writers and people acknowledge that, like, kind of respected what both sides were doing and kind of just were able to just kind of stay cool with everybody.
Yeah, we were, and even still, like our crew, I feel like we kind of just laid low and did our own thing. We weren't really the most social. We would be around, but we kind of, played the background a little bit, right? Like tried to avoid getting into too much chaos with everybody.
Did y'all ever have any battles?
Like collective battles as a crew versus crew?
Yeah, or even yourself.
Yeah, yes, when I was younger, yeah, definitely. Like, I had quite a lot of beef when I was young. with some other writers. It got pretty hairy. They were writing on people's houses and guns involved and, like crazy stuff for back then.
Damn, they were pulling guns on you, or you were pulling guns on them?
They were no comment. No,
Nice.
they were carrying guns, looking for people, right?
Damn.
Yeah, and chasing people off buses and coming home to having their tags on the front porch, and that didn't go over too well with the fams. So there was always beef, and there's always been skirmishes here and there. I don't, everyone knows if they know whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I've had my fair share too, on both sides.
Yeah.
Defense and offense.
Correct. And some, some of us in our crew or whatever are better at navigating that than others, right? Like, we got some loose cannons and we got some chill folks, so we kind of have a happy medium in there,
It's good to keep a couple loose cannons around.
Always.
Yeah,
locked and loaded.
But I mean, it's part of the game. But as I get older, it's just it's pretty ridiculous to take things to that level over. It's not even sometimes you tagged over me, you tagged next to me.
Yeah, right? Like, I agree, 1,000%.
Or even like, I talked about this with Crayon once. I think he said it like, I'm going to go out in the middle of the night and use my paint and risk getting arrested just so I can like cross you out, as opposed to like getting my shit up. It's kind of like backwards.
Kind of defeats the purpose.
Yeah,
right?
A little bit. But I mean, I appreciate battles that are like kind of based over style, or like sometimes there are just like tensions that just like got to be resolved. Like, this town ain't big enough for the both of us type of thing.
Right. Well, it's like, on that note, it's like at some point in time, it became like racking. Do I want to get caught racking before I even get to go actually do what I'm trying to do? Or do I want to just figure that out, get my paint, get my supplies, then be able to go and take that second risk, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, something big that we should talk about that I feel like some people aren't aware of this, but you are the narrator of Piece by Piece, the documentary.
True.
How did that come together?
Well, you brought up an interesting point, because you said, some people aren't aware. Initially, that was part of kind of my initial plan, was to make it so that it was a little bit low-key and obscure, right? So Nick Hill, the producer, he wound up reaching out to a friend of ours, a mutual friend. Somehow they started talking. He mentioned he's doing this film for school on Bay Area Graffiti, yada, yada, yada. My friend kind of hit us up, connected us all together. And, as with Graff, a lot of times there's a lot of people that come at you asking for projects or whatever. We kind of sent him, on these missions to go talk to this guy, go talk to that guy, go over here, go do this. And he kept doing it. And we were kind of like, whoa, this guy he's really all about it. He's for real about this.
Wasn't Dean the first person that he made contact with?
I believe so. Yes. Dean TMF. Salute.
And that was kind of like from there, kind of more intros came.
Correct. And, on that note, Dean was also one of my favorite writers to see at Psycho City. He definitely had a really impactful run there for quite a while. Big up to Dean for sure. And then, they reached out to everybody for the most part, and everybody who was down participated. And, I kind of helped Nick out a little bit with just kind of, here, talk to this guy, or here, give him some ideas of who to talk to or whatever. And eventually he's like, hey, I want you to be the narrator. I was like, yeah, no way. Nope, not for me, man. I'm cool. And I tried to recommend like 10 other people, and he hit them all up and they said no. And So eventually I kind of reluctantly was like, okay, I'll do this.
Who are some of the other people you recommended?
Anybody and anybody.
Okay.
I was just like, yo, go holler at that guy, whatever. I don't need to be, I'm not a big limelight kind of guy, right? I didn't need that attention. I felt it would be way too much attention. So, yeah. And then eventually he just was relentless. And I was like, all right, let's give it a shot, man. Let's see what happens. And we kind of broke the rules a little bit too, right? With the narrator is usually just a total outsider. And I guess somewhat in the film deal, the narrator isn't supposed to be also kind of part of the movie. So that was an interesting little deal too.
Are you talking about like the scenes of you like walking around or?
Yeah, correct.
Well, there's also like a tiny segment on HTK too.
Yes. And that was, I think that was going to happen either way. I can't, I don't know. Right. Like, but that also at the same time was a little bit of like, well, if we're going to be involved in this, I want to make sure my crew's, getting a little shine too, regardless of whether we're worthy of it or not. Like, I'm going to get my boys up. And the other crew on that same note too would have been, was TPC. I kind of specifically wanted to make sure that they got some shine because they had a big impact on the Bay too. So,
well, I actually really enjoyed the like scenes of you, like especially like walking to Psycho City. I believe there's like a scene in going to the Masonic bus yards. But then it was kind of interesting because then they talked about like your childhood. But that was kind of like, I feel like that was also useful to kind of like establish yourself as kind of like the prototype graffiti, like kind of like an everyman graffiti writer, like talking about the background of like, we're all from different backgrounds, but we're all just people, right? Like if we separate the illegal, crazy, artistic shit we're doing, we kind of all have like our own story like that.
And that was kind of, one of the reasons I picked Signor, right, was I didn't want it to be about me as ego guy or whatever, right? Like I picked Signor just to have it be about, and in my naivety, Signor, I was like, oh, man, right? Like just a dude,
right?
Just a man. And also a little flip around of the letters, right? Like a little camouflage, Signor, flip it around, Renos, whatever. But that was a subtle nod just to kind of the graffiti world. And that was kind of the approach I tried to take, was to have it be that, yes, everybody's got their own story and this is just happens to be a segment of it, but we all have our own, and then we do the graph, right? Like but we're all just random. Everybody's involved. It's a diverse crowd, right? There's no particular economic stratosphere or whatever who the writer is. It's broad covering.
So did you write some of that stuff too?
Some of the what?
The like dialogue and
the narration? Yeah.
Because I remember as soon as we saw like that Senor tag, we're like, oh, okay, that's Renos. But I think I've seen like people now like leave comments and stuff like, I didn't know that was the narrator.
And that's dope that you say that, because that was the game plan, right? Was that you would put it together because you're a writer, right? So you're like, oh, that's dope, whatever. And not like that, but that it maybe then it gives it a little bit of legitimacy.
Yeah,
somewhat.
Yeah, for sure. It did.
You know?
Definitely did.
To legitimacy to the writers.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, I mean, I've told you this, but like, so I was at the premiere, I was 16, 17. I remember it was a big deal that this was coming. I remember I never met Nick. I don't think I ever met Nick Hill. I might have met him, but I remember like the word got around that like, yo, there's going to be an official like Frisco Graff documentary, and he was like looking for footage and flicks, and some of my friends were like going out and like bombing and filming it just to submit to him, which ended up being in the film and stuff. So there was like a lot of buzz coming around it because like the San Francisco graffiti story is like so rich. And yeah, I definitely feel like there was like this feeling of like, man, we need more representation. But yeah, I always say it's like a core memory for me being like 17 years old at that premiere with pretty much like damn near every writer in the city was there.
Dope.
Some pretty legendary people. I was drinking a 40 of Mickey's in the Roxy Theater. The bathroom got completely crushed. I remember that too. I want to say at least one person was like smoking weed in there.
Oh yeah.
And then just like the cheers and the applause of all the different parts, and just the mob of people outside after that shit let out. That was pretty fucking epic to see.
That's so dope to hear, man. Yeah, that's so dope to hear. I didn't make it to the premiere.
Oh, you weren't there?
I was not there.
Okay.
I was not there.
So almost every writer in the city was there.
Well, as you said that, I was like, oh man, I blew it. But no, I didn't make it. And, you know, one of the reasons, it was too much. You know, I couldn't handle that. It was just too much.
That would have been a lot. Hey, man, your narration, bro.
Exactly, right? Like, and I'm not on my own tip where I need to be in a movie theater hearing myself talk, man. Like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah.
And luckily, I had a trade show to go to for work.
You had an excuse.
And I had the perfect out. And, like, work was like, I don't think I could have even got out of it if I wanted to. But I was just like, oh, this is perfect. This will allow me to dip, do its thing. Like, I can just chill. I'm focused on work. We're good, you know? Yeah, that's dope you were there.
Yeah. No,
I heard it was hype, you know?
Yeah.
I heard it was lit, so that's dope, man.
I mean, well, what do you, what kind of impact do you think the documentary had?
You know, that's a great question. Over time, the reason why I finally agreed to do it was because of the impact that Style Wars had on me and my pursuit of Graff. That was the motivation to go ahead and be the narrator or whatever, was to hopefully kind of recreate that for our time, for our location, and for our era. And it took a long time before I started to receive people telling me like, no way, dude, that movie, that inspired me. And
it took a long time?
It took a while, yeah. I mean, maybe because I wasn't seeking it out or whatever.
Also, like, at the time, not to interrupt, but at the time it dropped, it was like this shit was, like, still happening.
Oh, yeah.
So it was like, oh, yeah, there goes the homie, there's that. But then, like, years later, it's like, oh, shit. Like,
right.
That's all gone now.
It's all gone. And I was still, you know, after it dropped, I had a long bout of paranoia, you know, and just, I was skirted out thinking everybody's looking for woo, you know. So I wasn't even trying to talk to anybody about the movie at all, right? And, you know, even when it came out, I got some mixed feedback.
I was going to ask about that, too.
Yeah, I got some mixed feedback right away. Some people weren't happy that they weren't in it, right? But
I was going to ask about
dude,
that.
How do you get everybody in it, right? Like, you have a window of time and you have to set a deadline, and eventually if you're down, you're down. And if you're not, you're not.
I'm also sure there's some people that were like, nah, fuck that. You can't have my footage. And when it came out, they're like, fuck, how come they,
Dude, I guarantee there are a couple photo archives that we tried to get access, not we, but we tried to get access to, and we were denied. And I wish we could have had access to that because there was so much in there. And for whatever reason, everyone's got their own reasons. But then at the same time, it was like, afterwards, people are like, oh, whoop-de-whoop. And it's like, well, okay, well, dope, dude. Make your own. Yeah. Now it's awesome. Let's take your photos and do this or whatever, right? Like, take it on yourself and go put your own documentary out, right? And you can't please everybody especially with something as subjective as Graff, because we all have our own influences and our own tales to tell, our own history. None of it's going to match, you know? So... but yeah, to get back, it took a while, but I started to realize as I met is I've met younger kids or whatever, younger people, and they mentioned that they saw that at a pivotal time in their lives, interests or whatever, that inspired them to go into Graff or appreciate it or whatever. And it's humbling. It's very nice. It's pretty dope. It's a good feeling.
Well, I think it's also helped that it's been on YouTube for like
Yeah.
17 years, like since the beginning of YouTube, or it's been able to reach so many people. I used to have the DVD, but I let somebody borrow it. Never let anybody borrow anything, bro. Like, honestly. Yeah, I was also curious, like, because one of the main complaints that I heard about it, just from the OGs that I fuck with, is like, the 80s was too short. They didn't talk long enough about the 80s. Because, like I said, like, I was born in the 80s, so I have no idea. But the more I hear about it, the more I understand, like, how special that time period was to the locals. So I was just kind of curious if you know, like, how the timeline and the story of the documentary, like, how did that get developed?
It's interesting. I think they, when I say they, meaning kind of like the production team and the dudes that Nick was involved with, I think they kind of had just their concept of how much they wanted to dedicate to each segment of timeline. Also recognizing too that so it's 2002 or 3, let's say, they're also younger, right? So their connection maybe going back to the 80s is fuzzy. It's not as strong, right? Whereas to them, 90s and then whoever's rocking, that's who their flavor of the month, or that's who their focus is going to naturally lean to. I think you could pontificate about the 80s for quite a while, because it was a very special time, very unique, and it was its own thing. And you could have a whole movie dedicated to the 80s. So I don't know. I understand the complaints. I think we could wax nostalgia about it forever, but you got to kind of keep it moving. So, yeah.
No, I mean, well, the other thing about the 90s is that's when people were painting here that are just more known worldwide.
Correct.
To this day.
Yes.
Whether it's MSK or Gray or KR, and not the Frisco KR, because there is a Frisco KR.
King Razor.
Yeah.
He was, he always had my favorite KRs. He did really big KRs at the top back panel in the center of almost every panel. He did a lot of KRs. They were dope.
Yeah, yes. That's like a perfect example because the locals are like, oh, bruh, King Razor.
Right.
And they don't even really give a fuck about like the New York KR.
New York KR.
But
yes.
He's known, he's traveled and he's done other things. So I think that's kind of where the conflict comes in. But it's just
Definitely.
hard. To me though, like the 90s, I have more attachment to that too, just because that is actually when I was a kid. So I kind of just remember the local shit kind of coexisting with. I didn't even know these dudes were from out of town.
Right.
They were all over the city for years, so I just assumed they were like part of this whole thing.
Mm-hmm. And you brought up a good point. I think, I think the 80s. Man, you could go on about the 80s for a long time, and that scene was untainted by outsiders, right? So, yeah, I agree. I think the 80s were dope. I think we could go on and on about them forever. The other thing about the 80s, though, is that the photos don't really exist.
Yeah, that too, huh?
Yeah, and some of the dudes who have the photos from the 80s. Some of those dudes might not have been the most willing to up their photos for the documentary.
Yep.
I'll leave it at that, right?
I think you're probably right about that.
Yeah, and I think I totally agree. I definitely think there are a lot of people missing. I'll put it that way. But you can only do so much.
But that's why I was curious, like, how did they create, like, that storyline, so to speak? Because to me, it was pretty comprehensive. Going from the 80's to Psycho City, to the end of Psycho City, to the pits, to MSK, to KUK, and Ty, and Dream, and it was pretty comprehensive. So I was just curious, like, how they developed the chapters.
Oof,
especially since, like, Nick Hill was not from here and he was younger. Like, I'm just curious how that storyline came about.
You know, I don't want to speak for him or for them, but I think we definitely helped steer that as much as possible as well, and tried to ensure there's, it wasn't my project, right? I'm not the coach. I was just a player on the field, but we tried to steer him as much as possible to the right people to get as much as he could out of them from their take. Were we successful or not? Who knows? No, because you can never. Like I said, graffiti is so subjective because everybody has their own heroes, their own timelines, and it's all blurry. We're all kids, and we're all trying to kind of keep this quote unquote record straight, right? But it's murky. So, yeah, it's a hard one to keep everybody happy.
I mean, close enough for me, man. I think it's about as comprehensive as you can get. I'm not sure that there needs to be another one. I'm not. I mean, there could be, but I don't think there ever will be another one. I don't think. I mean, kind of like what we're talking about, like, just because that scene that was around in 2004 isn't even here anymore.
Right.
I don't really know how you could get access to all these. So many more people have died since then. So many people have moved. They're not even in the Bay anymore. I don't know if you could get some of those same interviews. People are older. They forgot more.
Yeah.
So I'm like, actually, 20 years later, looking back at it, I'm like really happy that Piece by Piece exists, because up to that point, it was the best documentation of this history.
Yeah, word, man. And it's a snapshot in time, right? Like you are correct. Like you can't, there's so many different missing pieces at this point. You can't go back and retrace it. Although at the same time, I think it would be dope for anybody who's active now to do the same thing with their scene, with whatever it may be, right? And kind of do their own version of this, right? Because it has been 20 years and everything has changed, and the players in the game have changed, and who's up, and there's enough people out there doing stuff. Maybe they'll have a similar story, right? Like,
I don't think so. And then not to like, I don't know what's the word, but not to like shit on the new generation, because that's never what I try to do. And I've actually seen a couple like cool little YouTube documentaries, but it's mostly just people bombing,
right?
Which is cool too. I enjoy that. But the reason I say that is because there's a huge generation gap. Like I said, I feel like I was the last tail end to kind of catch graffiti culture as it was. Like, there's a clear lineage from like 80's to 90's to early 2000s, and the lineage kind of breaks there. Because in my theory is that's when gentrification hit. That's when the neighborhoods changed. So you had less kids who just grew up with this stuff. They're scattered all over the place, and they're growing up in towns and cities that didn't have this type of graffiti history. Most of the old crews, like almost none of them have been like passed along to like newer members to like keep it alive. There's so fewer spots to paint. Like day spots, like you mentioned, Coors and Clockwork and Silver Terrace and Crocker and Cycles, like there's like 2 spots that I know of off the top of my head where you can go and get away with painting. The buff is crazy. There's a whole new tech money regime that is really just like, they're anti-graffiti to the fullest. They will prosecute the fuck out of you. There's social media, there's cameras. And then just stylistically, like, the styles haven't really been passed down. Like, you know, that what I was talking about earlier about driving around and just like remembering, like, bro, there used to be burners, like illegal burners on trucks, walls, rooftops, subways. And now you pretty much just have tags and throwies, which is cool.
Right.
But I say all that to say the culture of piece by piece kind of like ends at, like, what would be in that? I'm not really even sure as a community, like, what would be in the next chapter of that story.
That's a very good point. I don't know. I'm outside of the scene a little bit, right? And you brought up a really good point, and I don't know how to. I think the focus on piecing has unfortunately faded.
Yeah.
Collectively from Graff. And
kind of worldwide, right?
Kind of.
Yeah.
And the technical aspect of piecing, at least that in theory of what we were trying to do, I don't even know if I really have ever accomplished it, right? But just the thought pattern of what I was trying to do with my letters, I think that concept has definitely taken a back seat to a lot of Graff and bombing and throw ups and fill-ins. I would like to see it come back, and maybe it will. I don't know, but I think there's definitely some truth to that.
I mean, even tags.
Yes.
Even the technical style of tagging is not like, right now you can go and you can go to the most crushed wall in San Francisco right now. It's going to be bus flow attempts by people who have never tagged on a bus. Right? Like,
yeah.
That's another thing. Like, the munis are like clean.
Right. They're super clean.
And they have cameras on the inside and outside.
Yes.
And every now and then you'll see, like, okay, the Giants win the World Series or whatever.
Right.
They fucking get stopped at 24th and they get bombed. But, stylistically, you don't really see, like, super clean technical bus flows. You don't see, like, downtown hands. You don't see, like, twist type of letters.
No, it's definitely changed. But I think about that sometimes too, right? Like, if you could take dudes from the 80's and they would probably say the same thing about those in the 90's, right?
For sure.
And the 90's saying it about the mid thousands, and us old dudes, saying the same thing. But the interesting thing is that, at least my hope is that the dudes that are active, the youngsters that are doing their thing, they're so caught up in it that they could care less, and they're doing the same shit we were doing. They're not even on social media. They might have a couple of photos. They're smart enough to just be low key. They're doing their thing and lurking with their crew and living the same Graff life that we lived. And not too long ago, I found a group of kids. It was a Saturday evening down in the suburbs. I see a group of 6 kids walking down the street. And I'm like looking at them, and it's a super, there's one white kid, there, whatever. The makeup of the crew, I saw them. I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it. I was like, those kids are writers. My girlie's in the car, and I'm like, yo, I'm going to go turn around. She's like, come on, we're going to go get talking. No, I'm going to turn around. I turn around, I roll up, I roll my window down, and it is an industrial section part of town. There's nothing going on out there. I'm like, hey, what you write? And they kind of look, they stop, and they all look at me. And I'm like, nah, what do you write? And they're like, what do you mean, you write? And I was like, yeah, I write. What do you write? And they kind of come up to the window, and they're like, what's up? And I'm like, yeah, whatever. This is what I write. I'm like, oh, okay. And then they go around, and they're like, I'm woo, 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 right? They give me the roll call, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool, word, whatever. So I keep driving. We go to this restaurant and going to go get some food. Turns out the restaurant, we're not going to eat there. So we walk back out. They're still walking down the block, walking to the train station. So I stop and I start talking to them. And it was just so refreshing because they were so deep in the mix. They had just painted this little creek. They took the train all the way down there from San Jose just to paint this little creek. They were walking around catching tags, and they were super cool kids. Shout out to them. I think they'll know who they are. And it was just really refreshing. It was dope. And it made me realize like they're so deep into the Graff game or whatever that it's still going, you know, and they're looking at me going, dude, what the fuck? How does this guy know that we were writers? We're just walking, and I just knew, and you could just tell. And so it was just very refreshing. The Graff game is still going amongst them, right?
That's awesome.
So yeah, that's my little take.
No, that's the kind of silver lining to that cloud is like, it's not going to be what it was.
No,
but it is still going on. And
For
then
sure.
That's also where you kind of got to like let go of any judgments and just let them, hey, do what you do, bro. Do a bus flow, do a downtown, do a piece, whatever you want to do it. Thing. And then whatever we're talking about that we're not seeing enough of, there is still somebody out there who's trying their hand at it.
For sure.
And it's okay for it to evolve and take on different things. There still is, like I said, like a bit of a disconnect there. Yes. And that's because of things that's kind of outside of our control. But you know, I have a similar story, man. I was driving down Alamany Boulevard, and I seen some kids straight up tagging in broad daylight. And I was like, hey, what's up? Hit me up, Dregs One. And then one of them was like, you're a toy. And I was like, oh. And I was like, what'd you say? Fucking, like, I couldn't, you know, what am I gonna do? Hop out? Like, I almost thought about it, like busting a bitch and then hopping out. And I was like, damn, nah, he got me. Oh, well.
Yeah.
So if you're watching that, fuck you, okay? But it's all good.
Well, I'm still a toy. You know, that's the way I look at it, right?
I mean,
like,
he had the right response, right?
Yeah,
I don't know you. Get the fuck out of here.
Who are you, fool? I never heard of you. You know, I've never seen you up. You know, it's funny because then that exact quote is I heard from somebody, you know, when they're like, oh, who's the narrator, whatever. And that was his quote. It's like, I never seen him up. And
wow.
Like, yes.
Yeah.
You know, word up.
Right.
Good shit, you know?
I mean, that goes into a whole nother thing of like something that starts off as like, you're writing your name everywhere. It's very ego based.
Oh, super. Geez.
As you get older, you let go of more of that shit, and you're like, it doesn't matter how up I am, or it doesn't really matter if, you know, like sometimes like that whole worrying about like, is this piece good enough, or like it takes the fun out of graffiti, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we are all suffering from overinflated egos, over doing something that most people want to chop your hands off for.
Yeah.
You know, and we think it's some kind of big deal. It's a little bit of a narcissistic personality disorder.
It is.
Well, we suffer from.
I think it's also
collectively.
It's a collective of people that probably didn't get enough attention and enough positive outlets. So this is what this is how we had to cope with that.
Yeah, you know, I think about that sometimes though, and yes, there's probably some truth to it. I think at the same time, Graff taps into some really interesting things. You know, writing itself, the exercise of writing, longhand or whatever, it requires a lot of discipline. It requires a long-term thought process, and it builds the ability to be able to think long-term for people, right? And I think like even with schools like not teaching cursive,
yeah,
they're starting to notice the kids are unable to fully process long-term thought.
Yep.
And I think, you know, with the study of Graff, once you really get into it outside of the ego and all of that, the actual craft and technique and the technicality in it, you know, it's not as mindless as it may seem.
Not at all.
And I think there are some, what am I trying to say? I think there's some worthy recognition given to, you know, that the craft itself is worthy of recognition of it being more than just mindless doodles on, you know, the general public's property or whatever.
Yeah, there's so much creativity that goes into it. It's the only illegal art form. There's a lot of character building. There's a community. Like one thing I always loved is like how much graffiti relies on knowing somebody who knows some other shit that you don't know.
Yeah.
And the sharing of techniques and like, oh, this is how you get on that one rooftop. Or like, oh, this is the spot in Chinatown. They got the ink.
Yeah.
And then just like the fact that to this day, I think most of my close friends are people I did graffiti with.
Yeah, for sure.
And it just opened me up to such a big network of people. So the positives definitely outweigh the negatives. And then, like I said, that whole Vandal versus Rasta thing, like at a certain point you kind of grow towards one side or the other. And I don't know, as I get older, I kind of like these kinds of conversations where we just nerd out on like the whole philosophy. One day I'm gonna write the book, man. Like
Dope.
The philosophy of graffiti.
Dope. Someone should.
Yeah, someone out there should do
that. I think sometimes it's hard to decide if, at a certain point, you have to become the Rasta instead of the Vandal.
I think so.
Or you graduate, you graduate to the, what's the wise Vandal?
The wise Vandal.
The wise Vandal, you don't vandalize as much. You just think about it a lot. You just don't do it, right? You don't relapse. You're in recovery.
Yeah, I like that.
I think about that a lot, right? It's kind of like as you get to a certain point, you have to turn yourself into a recovery phase and just kind of take it a different step, right? Like I have these sketchbooks that are just covered in tags, and I think to an outsider it's got to be super random to look at these frantic scribbles and just whatever, right? But writers maybe appreciate that, right? And that's what you got to do. And is it worth going out and catching a bunch of tags, catching a bunch of cases when there's a good chance you're older than the judge.
Man, that's a hell of a thought right there.
Or you're definitely older than the police and the DA who are prosecuting you or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like
the DA's fresh out of law school looking at you like, fucking loser.
Like, what's this guy doing? He's over 50?
Yeah.
Damn, son. You should have dropped this off.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we did this, man. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Word up. Me too.
Learned a lot. Got some dope ass tags in my black book, which I appreciate.
Thanks, man. Yeah.
A year and a half in the making.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad I got to do it. We could obviously go on for hours, right? Like, that was dope, though. Appreciate it.
Well, one of these days, we can come back and talk more of graffiti philosophy.
Word up, man. Thank you.
All right,
Appreciate
man.
Good
Thanks a
out.
lot. There it is, everybody. Renos, Hard Times Known, in the house.
Hilltop Kids.
Frisco to Redwood City. Shout out to the whole peninsula. Shout out to the whole Bay. Shout out to the whole world. See you next time.
Peace.
Peace.
Recognize where you got the game. We got our own style, got our own slang. Northern California is a West Coast thing. This is the history of the Bay. Recognize where you got the game. We got our own style, got our own slang. Northern California is a West Coast thing. This is the history of the Bay.